Hello, me hearties. Welcome back to another episode of Heart Scales, the YouTube channel and future snake breeding venture from an animal-loving couple documenting and sharing their journey and learned experiences with you. Now, my collection has clearly grown since I made the first half of this mini-series. 10 months ago, I made part 1 of keeping 24 reptiles. Now, when I'm finally making part 2, I'm up to 60 reptiles in all, and several mammals as well, which tells you a lot about how much we adore these animals. If you haven't already seen part 1, make sure to click on the link here to start from the beginning. Now, last time I talked about the patience, perseverance, dedication, and research that is necessary when keeping, especially a large number of, reptiles. This time, I'm going to finish off this mini-series by completing the list I set off to talk about nearly a year ago, and now I have some more experience to boot, so let's get right into it. What do I mean when I say it takes courage to keep reptiles? Well, it applies in a few ways to keeping, some you might expect and some you might not have thought about before. For one, it can definitely take some courage for a beginner reptile keeper to even start picking up and handling the reptile. Anything with a mouth can bite. And anytime that thing with a mouth has teeth, it could hurt when and if they do. So it's only natural that many of us unintentionally flinch or shy away entirely from an animal when we think they might bite us. Now, this is nothing to be ashamed of. The very reason for the evolutionary development of fear is that it increases our chances of survival. There are plenty of evolutionary psychologists and behaviorists that argue that natural selection has led to the development of fearful reactions to potential threats. You are much more likely to survive if you assume that the snake is going to bite you and you move away from it, or that rustling in the bushes is actually a tiger that could jump out and eat you, than if you just fearlessly assume it's only the wind in that bush, or that the snake will never bite. That sort of fearlessness more often leads to an untimely end. So it is not only natural and frankly beneficial to automatically flinch away from a potential bite, but it's also pretty smart to use caution and assume that anything with teeth can and will bite, whether it's a snake, a dog, a cat. Well, I guess birds don't have teeth, but they could bite as well. Now, I'm going to make something very clear after having said this. All that being the case, it does not mean we should live in fear of snakes, especially our own pet snakes. But it does mean we may have to overcome our own biology at work with a little or sometimes even a lot of courage to reach in and pick up a snake that looks like it might bite us. Don't spill your water. Well, courage does not mean being fearless. It means doing something in spite of feeling that fear. That is quite often part and parcel of being a reptile keeper. Now, I have a decent amount of courage at this point with my snakes, and in the future I'll probably be even more courageous. I will most often just reach in and pick up one of my hognoses, even if they're bluff striking and hissing at me, feeling pretty confident that I will probably not get bitten. But it took me some time to develop that courage. I may have mentioned this before, but when I first got Truffle, my very first hognose and first pet snake as an adult, I was really scared to pick her up. I had to ask my husband to get her out of her tub for me, and once she was out and then I felt relatively confident she wasn't going to bite me, he could hand her to me and then I could hold her. It took maybe about a dozen times of forcing myself to just reach in and pick her up, close my eyes and just have some courage and grab her, and it took that to finally get past the fear that I will get bitten. Some people, they might never feel that afraid, and others might take a lot longer to get to that point. Whatever your pace and your journey, just know that it's okay, you're doing just fine, and you'll get there. Please note that what I'm talking about here is in regards to non-venomous or non-lethal snakes. If you have snakes which possess medically significant venom, I have no experience in that regard, and I cannot and do not recommend reaching in and grabbing those snakes without first ensuring you have supplies available to you to ensure your safety and a lot of know-how and experience already. This section applies to my fellow keepers without HOTS, as they're sometimes called, or venomous snakes that can cause harm. And the last thing I'll say about courage when owning reptiles is that it also takes courage to do the right thing. Courage to take them to the vet when you suspect something is wrong. Courage to ask for help when you're not sure what to do or feel you may need to make a change. And courage to provide the necessary care even when it's difficult or scary. From administering oral medications to assist feeding. Any and all animals in our care will inevitably require some sort of outside assistance, and some may need that more often than others. It is up to us as their guardians and caretakers to find the courage to get that outside assistance and do what needs to be done when it is needed. Organization. This one is pretty simple and probably doesn't need much explanation. Just as one might keep records of their dog or cat's vaccinations or spay-neuter procedures, one should also keep records of their reptile's medical information. Keeping track of your snake's weight, how often they're eating, when their last shed was, it's all sort of part of organizing and record keeping to ensure all your ducks are in a row when you end up needing that info for a sudden vet visit. Or you think something may be amiss and it would be really helpful to have such information at hand. This is a must if you have more than 1 or 2 reptiles because it can be easy to get mixed up or forget something important. With 55 snakes, I could certainly forget the last time Aladdin shed, for example, or what chroma weighs currently. Having that info recorded and stored right on my phone has been really useful and immensely relieving because I know I have that information if I need it, and it's okay if I don't remember everything. Keeping this information in a reptile keeping app is a great way to store and organize your reptile's important info. If you are partial to pen and paper, keep a binder somewhere next to your other important records and make sure to pull it out occasionally to jot down updates, such as your snake has gained or lost a few grams. Organizing our reptile room so that we can easily find what we need when we need it is also extremely beneficial and frankly just good for quality of life. Knowing right where my handy-dandy temp gun is, where the right size hook is when I need it, where all of our peroxide and other cleaners and hand sanitizer are being stored, and having our already cleaned and sanitized hides, decor, and tools neatly organized and labeled and set apart from anything that still needs to be cleaned or sanitized is extremely important, especially when you have a large number of reptiles. Speaking of cleaning supplies and separating sanitized items from used ones, hygiene is of the utmost importance in a reptile keeper's routine. A good biosecurity program is in fact a necessity for any keeper with a multitude of herps, and even more so if you plan on breeding. Biosecurity means procedures which are intended to protect both humans and their animals from illness and disease. Such measures like wearing gloves, using appropriate cleaning and disinfecting agents, and quarantining new or sick pets helps to ensure that you are far less likely to spread viruses or bacteria from one animal to another. Keeping a new pet away from the rest with their own supplies that are not shared with other pets for at least 3 months is a way to quarantine a new animal from the rest of your collection and helps combat the possibility of that new animal bringing in a sickness that could affect your other pets. 3 months is sort of the minimum quarantine, in my opinion. You can never quarantine for too long. And indeed, some keepers practice something called perma-quarantine, which is pretty much what it sounds like. All of their animals are permanently quarantined from each of their other animals as best as they can. Now, this is never going to be perfect if you are breeding these animals because inevitably, well, some of those animals have to be in quite close contact in order for breeding to commence. At that point, at least between those 2 animals and any other animals you may have paired them with or will pair them with, they have broken that perma-quarantine. But it is still something worth looking into and considering, and it is certainly one of the best ways we know of right now to reduce potential outbreaks of illness in your collection. The only defense I would consider to be even better than that is to buy judiciously. Only purchase reptiles from responsible, respectable breeders who are producing healthy animals. If you're not absolutely 100% positive that a breeder is keeping a good biosecurity program and has healthy, beautiful animals with consistently good reviews, it might be best to hold off on purchasing from that person. Now, I've talked about this a lot in my podcast with my friend Sue, the Heart Plus Moon Hogcast, but I can't talk about hygiene without at least mentioning crypto. Cryptosporidium is a parasitic protozoa that causes gastrointestinal inflammation and for hog noses is unfortunately always lethal. There is no cure. There are many different species of crypto, and different species affect different animals in different ways. There are some species of crypto that affect humans and cattle, which merely tend to give us bad tummy issues or a persistent cough until treated. Then there are species like C. varani and C. serpentis that affect reptiles and is far more deadly. Crypto spreads very easily through any and all bodily fluids and is extremely hard to kill. The only ways to deactivate crypto is with extremely high heated steam for an extended period of time, something we're not typically able to do in our homes unfortunately, or through the use of 6% or stronger peroxide, which must be in contact with the crypto for 20 minutes or so. This has a 99.9% kill rate of crypto. This is one of the many harmful biological compounds that we as keepers should be aware of and vigilant against, especially when introducing new animals to our homes and other animals. If you would like to learn more about crypto and how to prevent its spread, I definitely recommend going to hiphogs.com and reviewing the page on cryptosporidium information. Besides salmonella and crypto, other potential health concerns related to hygiene with reptiles include RIs, or respiratory infections, snake mites, and bacterial dermatitis. So I cannot stress enough the importance of hygiene and a good, solid biosecurity program. Finding an exotic vet. This is a step in preparing for a new scaly friend that all too often, it appears new reptile keepers skip altogether. Unfortunately, it is a vital step that we really do need to pay attention to. In 2024, it was estimated that we had about 130,000 vets in the United States. About a quarter of these vets were a mix of food or farm animal vets, lab animal vets, and wildlife vets. And about 14,000 vets worked for corporations or in academia. That leaves only about 70,000 vets for the tens of millions of animals we keep as pets here in the United States. And most of those vets are trained for canine and feline care, not exotics like our pet reptiles. Before we even start talking about exotic vets, it is clear that we have a shortage of veterinarians in the US. Veterinary associations have predicted that we are in need of at least 17,000 more vets to meet demands. Now, I couldn't find total exotic vet numbers in the States, but if we go off of the number registered with the AVMA, we had potentially 1,085 as of 2023. Only 17 of which were active board-certified diplomates in reptile and amphibian specialties. In a report published by PangoVet in 2025, there are approximately 17 million exotic pets owned by roughly 9 million households in America. About half of those are reptiles. So for the estimated 8 or 9 million pet reptiles in America, according to the information we have available at this time, and I suspect the number is actually much larger, we have less than 1,000 exotic vets to tend to their medical needs. And the number of pet reptiles is expected to grow exponentially, while the number of vets is not. On top of all of that, each exotic vet really requires training and experience with specific species of animals to be of much use to specific pet owners. All in all, a properly trained, experienced exotic vet for our specific pet reptile is exceedingly rare. So your number one job before acquiring a pet reptile is locating the closest one to you and making sure you have the ability to transport your new scaly friend to that vet when the need arises. It's not something we like to think about, and of course we hope it will never happen, but our reptiles could suddenly develop a respiratory infection or get an injury or start having scale rot or show some other signs of illness, and it is best to know where you can go when this happens before that emergency arises. And keep in mind, the more reptiles you have, the more likely a health crisis is to arise. The 3 pillars of keeping any animal as a pet. time, space, and money. In regards to time, reptiles are a commitment. They are a lifestyle. It's not just about feeding them, doing an occasional deep clean, and calling it a day. Each species has unique needs: temperature gradients, humidity levels, lighting cycles, preferred substrate, horizontal or vertical space, and much more. Managing all of these for 60 reptiles means daily checks, regular cleaning, feeding schedules, documentation, and health monitoring. Experienced reptile keepers do often highlight the risk of burnout. It's essential to assess your capacity, both for time and commitment, and protect yourself from stretching yourself too thin. It may be that keeping 1 or 2 reptiles suits you very well, and keeping a dozen or more very much does not. Some reptiles can live upwards of 50 years, or, if you're considering getting into turtles, hundreds. That would be several lifetimes of commitment. So before you go hog wild, buying up a bunch of scaly critters because you have a newfound obsession with them, it's essential both for your sake and the sake of the animals that may end up in your care to assess your capacity both for time and commitment and ensure you're not going to be stretching yourself too thin. Keep these things in mind. Do yourself and any future pets of yours a favor by being true and honest to who you are and what you are personally really able and willing to commit to. Folks who know ahead of time that, say, 5 dozen reptiles is outside of their comfort zone are totally cool with me, and I respect anyone who recognizes their limitations. So yes, having a lot of reptiles means a lot of time dedicated to caring for those reptiles. Pretty straightforward. Now, let's talk about space. One day, I hope to have a reptile room that is similar to one of these amazing spaces I've seen all around the internet. But you don't have to have a reptile room to have reptiles. You just have to have enough room to have reptiles. Reptiles need enclosures that mimic their natural habitats. For instance, it is a widely accepted standard at this time that a bearded dragon requires a minimum of a 120-gallon enclosure measuring 4 by 2 by 2 feet. This enclosure will have to have the correct lighting, heating, space for basking, and also enough room for them to run around and find a place to cool down and hide. A female hognose snake, which is a fossorial species that likes to dig into the ground, would probably do well in a horizontal enclosure that is at least 36 by 18 by 18 with a lot of substrate. A crested gecko, on the other hand, prefers vertical space as an arboreal species and would maybe do well in, say, a 24 by 18 by 26 enclosure. Every individual critter will have different spatial needs, but regardless, multiply that by 60 and you're looking at a significant spatial commitment. Even my hognoses, most of which are currently housed in large rack systems, still need ample space to explore their apartments, as I like to call them, to stay mentally and physically healthy. Many breeders, in fact, utilize rack systems to maximize space, but it's vital to ensure each reptile's needs are met without compromising their well-being. Some species are simply too big and/or too active to be kept this way, and if we are going to be honest and transparent about our husbandry practices in the reptile community, we need to ensure that our breeding operations don't exceed our spatial capacity to keep our animals in appropriately sized enclosures. Keeping in mind the adult size of the reptile you are considering is a big part of the space commitment. If you love the idea of getting, say, a reticulated python, but like most people on this planet don't have the space for a 20 to 30 foot long snake, you might want to consider a smaller species. The house snake, for example, only gets to be about 2 to 4 feet long, depending on the sex, but they tend to be very similar in personality and curiosity to a retic. So know the size and enclosure requirements of an animal before you bring them into your home, and resolve to dedicate the appropriate space to any animal you do to ensure they thrive in your home. While it may seem luxurious to provide a smaller reptile with a 4-foot enclosure, for example, keep in mind that in the wild, many of these animals have large home ranges, some traveling more than 10 miles during breeding season. And while some reptiles do stay in relatively small home ranges their whole lives, those ranges are more like a quarter of a mile, or 1,320 feet, not 3 or 4 feet long. And of course, we must touch on money. The initial setup for each reptile, enclosure, heating, lighting, substrate, can be costly. Ongoing expenses include food, electricity, and veterinary care as well. A keeper can come under some sudden financial strain when multiple reptiles require medical attention simultaneously, and that can lead to expenses in the thousands. Beyond initial setup and necessary veterinary care, you will also likely be paying extra for your heating bills. Some reptiles, like uromastyx and bearded dragons, require constant high heat basking spots to be available to them. And if you live in a colder climate, especially if you don't have top-notch insulation, this would easily add a decent chunk to your electricity bills. There is no such thing as a live pet that is free to care for. All in all, caring for 60 reptiles demands significant time, ample space, and dedicated financial resources. It's a very rewarding endeavor for those prepared for the commitment. But the key word there is prepared and commitment. The well-being of these incredible creatures depends on our dedication, so dedicated we must be. Which brings me to my final topic of keeping so many reptiles: passion.
Go. Aye, more passion, more passion, more passion, more energy, more energy, more footwork, more footwork, more footwork, more passion, more energy.
Alright, well, that was something fun I threw in there for my segue. But in all seriousness, me hearties, we've talked about a lot of topics related to keeping a large number of reptiles. I've covered a lot of ground in this duology of episodes, including time, money, space, vets, courage, and hygiene, but none of those things will matter in the end if you're missing the most essential part of reptile care: passion for the animals. Passion is what gets you out of bed early to check on a hatchling that's pipped overnight. It's what keeps you up late researching a new husbandry breakthrough. It's what drives you to build better enclosures, question outdated care practices, and invest not just your resources and your precious time, but your heart into what you're doing. Because here's the truth: if you're not passionate about reptiles, you don't feel that fire in your chest and your belly every time you witness their beauty, their weirdness, their resilience, then having 60 or even 2 of them isn't just overwhelming at some point, it's a disaster and heartbreak waiting to happen. Passion is what prevents burnout. It's the antidote to complacency. It keeps you curious, humble, and always improving. Without it, the care suffers. That means the animals suffer. And that's not just a hobby gone wrong, that's a moral failure. Reptiles aren't inventory. They're not stepping stones to clout or profit. They are living beings with complex needs, and they deserve guardians who are invested in their well-being for the long haul. Breeding animals solely for money, it's not a plan, it's exploitation. And there's no place for it in ethical herpetoculture. Passion isn't just a nice to have, it's the line between doing this right or not doing it at all. So if you're dreaming about keeping a large collection, ask yourself this: do I have the time, the space, the money, and everything else I've listed in these videos? But most importantly, do I have the heart, the passion? Because at the end of the day, passion is the foundation everything else is built on. And without it, you're not building a collection, you're building a burden. Keep fewer animals if that means keeping them better. Stay curious, stay humble, and never ever forget, they didn't choose you, you chose them, so make it count. Remember that whether we mean to or not, whether we like it or not, each and every one of us is a representative of the reptile community, simply by choosing to have these animals. We are setting the standard, and our voices and our actions matter.
Hi, Megara. Look how big you have gotten. Hello, little cutie. Yeah? You just chilling? You just chilling and being adorable?